You've tuned in to the Beyond Hope podcast, your access to success strategies and more to help you survive and thrive through your loved one's addiction challenges while you move onward and upward with your life. Now, here's your host, Shar Jones.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is Shar Jones, and I'm the host of Beyond Hope, and I'm also the mother of an addict. So I understand what it means to love someone who struggles with addiction. It has been a very long journey for me, but I have gotten to a place of hope, beyond hope, which is kind of the ironic twist to the name, that I think really hope is where the healing begins. And on the other side of hope is life and joy and love and all these things that are no longer contingent upon the recovery of our addicts. So what I'm hoping to do with this podcast is bring to you so many people that I respect and admire, experts within the industry of addiction and recovery who have so much valuable information to share with me, with you, with all of us. And in addition, we'll be bringing you some stories of hope and hopefully some laughs, maybe some tears along the way, but it's going to be all good. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to this journey with you.
You're in that dreaded drama triangle and you're trying to take away the pain and the suffering from your child. You're preventing the lessons that will potentially bring them over to the creator role when they're ready and when they choose. But by doing things for them and taking away those things and trying to manage and control all the circumstances instead of focusing on yourself, it allows them to actually stay there longer and not see their own way through it.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. I'm just so happy you're here. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. Thank you for being here. And if you've listened before and you keep coming back, I appreciate you so much. It's just so amazing to know that I'm not on this journey alone. And that's what this is all about. It's to help each other rise up, let go of the shame, and to start showing ourselves the love and the compassion and the healing that we need so that we can be there for our loved ones. There's something pretty incredible that happens when we start to heal that allows our addicts to do the same. So with that, I'm excited to introduce you to Stephanie Myers. She is a friend of mine and she calls herself the Martyr Coach. And she's incredible. So enjoy this conversation. If you ever have questions or comments for me, you can always reach me at shar@beyondhoperadio.com. That's Shar with an S, SHAR @beyondhoperadio.com. And I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye for now. Sending you so much love. Stephanie, hi. I am just so excited to welcome you to the show.
Me too. It's always good to hear your voice, and I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, me too. I was just kind of reflecting over the last year, and when I was thinking about our conversation tonight, and I just want to tell you that it's been such a gift and watching you grow, and it's just been so beautiful to watch. I just want you to know that.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, it's an honor to be a part of your life and just to see your life kind of unfolding and all these blessings happening. And I just wanted to share that with you, that I appreciate your friendship.
Same goes. I feel like this is just going to be at one giant love fest because you are amazing. And I'm really, really honored to be here as well. And just same goes. Watching you open up and, lead these women who really need you in the journey that you're on too. It's really cool.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm just kind of reading your website. First of all, is so beautiful, and I was checking it out before our call, and it's just a really beautiful site. But you refer to yourself as the Martyr Coach, and in essence, you help your clients to reclaim their identity and higher purpose so that they can stop the self-imposed suffering and start their truth-telling journey. And I just love that. We need you.
Yeah.
Yes, good stuff. Really good stuff. Before we dive in, there's so many fun things that we're going to be talking about, and I'm excited to dive into those. But before we go there, I just want to give you a moment to introduce yourself and kind of share a little bit of your story with us.
Yeah. So I love that you picked those pieces up, and they still ring like very true in my heart. And that's how I know I'm onto something there. And really, it all comes from my childhood and the way I grew up. And for so long, it was a source of anxiety for me because what you and your moms are going through, I experienced as a child with my mom being the addict, as well as siblings and really a lot of my extended family. And so I was the quote unquote normal one who tried to keep the pieces together and keep the peace and fix everything and make sure things went smoothly so that I could be loved and valued and do the right things and be perfect, to kind of make some sense of the chaos going on around me. And for a lot of years, I was really angry about it. Like, why is this stuff happening to me? Why me? I just am a good person trying to help others and be in service. And all I want at the end of the day is to be loved and seen and heard and feel valued. And I wasn't necessarily getting that from the place that I thought that you got that from, which was with my family. Even though I know now that they love me deeply and that they did the best they could with the resources they had. And I'm super appreciative. Like, I don't mean to paint them as like really bad addict people. A lot of this stemmed from, me wanting to be heard, seen, and loved, which is like a normal thing for most people, not just children or adolescents or adults. Like, everybody needs those three things to not feel lonely and isolated. And so that was really my search, is like I found over time that I became addicted to people and trying to fix everything around me to meet that need of being heard, seen, and loved and feel valued. Of course, I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time. It was more of a automatic safety response because things felt turbulent and unsteady. And I don't by any means want to make any of my family out to sound like bad people who just had all these problems, because they're all wonderful, wonderful people who have their own struggles, just like I did. Mine happened to be people addiction because I was searching for that missing thing from my childhood. My parents and my siblings and other relatives, they all had their own struggles. And what came from mine is that in that devastation and pain there's always some sort of beauty to be found, whether it's within the person or outside of yourself, but hopefully you can find those things within, because it's a much steadier place to come from.
That is beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, it's taken a lot of time and energy to get to that realization and to let go and, just really make amends with my mom, particularly. Just so much anger pent up towards her, like she was the cause of all bad things in my life, even though at the same time, like, I truly did love her and see like the good things about her that she showed for so many people around us. And so many of my good qualities came from what she modeled as well. So it's this weird paradox that sometimes happens with the important people in our lives.
I was listening to a podcast recently that was talking about how influential a deeper understanding and connection to our roots can play on the recovery of our addicts. And on your website, I actually noticed that you were talking about that you help people kind of discover their family of origin and how that plays out in our lives. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So really, that was inspired by another friend who does similar work. She walked me through an exercise. Her name's Lisa Dean, and she does great coaching work too. And it was really about discovering the influences of the people who raised you, whether it's your parents or grandparents, just whoever it is that was your primary caretaker. They leave kind of traces with you. And so at first it's an exercise that really draws out what qualities did you see in them, good, bad, just name it without judgment. And then you get to talk about kind of what did that teach you? And I extended that not just to your family, but to your culture of origin, because there's so much wrapped up in that of telling us how we should behave and what we should do. And those messages are so pervasive, like with our family, with our friends and society, that like we can't help but mold into that a lot of times, especially as women, where we're taught to consensus take and agree with those around us and conform more to those values and not be as independently driven as men.
Oh, that's so true. It's so true. But the fact that you say like that it took you this long, I think that that's a common pain point for many of us, that it took us so long to get to this point. But it's the journey. The journey is so beautiful. And the sad thing, as painful as it is beautiful, but the difficult realization for me is that many people often don't get there. They don't have that same need and desire to explore that and get to know themselves on a deeper level. And for that, all the pain and all the heartache, it's kind of a blessing.
Yeah. And at first I was incredibly saddened when I saw all these other people that were choosing what I thought was choosing suffering. And in a way they are, but they don't know it. It's not a conscious choice. It's automatic. And I came to accept recently too, those people who aren't choosing to change and kind of heal themselves and can't hear the messages going around them. Sometimes they're a catalyst for the rest of us who are, because we get to see them model what it's like to struggle.
Oh my gosh.
And stay stuck in it and not be aware.
Wow. That's profound.
It's crazy, right?
It really is. And you had mentioned this too, that like this martyr role, which we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, just that martyrs can be put down and eye roll that and snicker that, and they're seen as melodramatic and the victims, and people have just this, I was going to say disgust. I don't know that that's the right word, but it triggers something in people.
Yeah.
And that whole thing where you see yourself and other people, I think that might have something to do with it. But your point right now, just about that shows many of us the way. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's very similar. I see the parallels of what you're saying there, because when we have such an emotional response to a word like martyr, if your visceral reaction is disgust or like, oh my God, they're such annoying people, or how dare they be like that? Like, it's just so painful for the rest of us, you know? If those are your automatic responses, there's something deeper within you that's either identifying with it or just you're not aware that it's somehow sending you a message that like, hey, this needs to be looked at. And you don't have to judge it and reject it. You can be curious and playful with it. We get to choose.
That's so true. I feel like I watched this on Dr. Phil many, many years ago, or maybe I don't remember who it was, but it was that whole bit that, that those little things that irritate us in other people, when we're irritated or upset by something that somebody does, that it's always an opportunity. It's a reflection for us to look within and see what's there. And I think once you figure that out, it just changes the way you see things.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, you might learn that lesson once and do really good for a while, and then other things come up and you forget, and then you find yourself back into that old programming, and the opportunity comes up again.
You're so
true. You get to deepen the learning.
Yeah, you're so right. You're so right, because I don't know how many times that I think about that, and it's like the first time I've heard it, and it's like, oh yeah.
Such big learning. I mean, this is not new stuff. Like, I didn't invent any of this. Like, so many psychologists, coaches, healers, whoever would say the same thing. Like, that's your work. If it irritates you at a really deep level that you can feel it in your body, you need to look at it and be curious about it.
Right. It's so true. Just kind of shifting back to our moms out there. So, obviously that's who we're talking to primarily. I mean, really this stuff can apply to anyone who is trying to overcome anything, right? This is just all,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be specific to addicts, but of course, from my personal experience, that's kind of who I gravitate towards as my moms out there. So for my moms who are hurting and suffering, because truly that's what it is. There is this suffering as they're moving through their loved one addiction. It's really a painful journey. And somewhere along the way, they have lost their sense of self. And I did.
Yeah.
I know I did. And I didn't even realize it until she was absent. And that's when I feel like I started to, I don't know, it did something to me. My focus became her, saving her, helping her, trying to understand what was happening with her. And I just wanted to ask you, like, with your clients, like, how do you help them, those moms that are suffering through their loved one's addiction? Sometimes it's a long, long journey. How do you help them start to discover or rediscover who they are?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it looks a little different for every person. My favorite process to bring people through, though, is something I learned in my coaching training. And it's really about breaking down how you see yourself, how others see you. And in a coaching session, we get to talk about those things and uncover what is still true for you, what's working for you, and what you want to keep and what you want to let go. And so there's a whole bunch of different exercises, like even something as simple as writing out or speaking out my perfect day. If you have somebody else that witnesses that and can hear you speak it, they'll be able to pick out key things if they're really actively listening. It doesn't even have to be a coach like me or, you do similar work. Like, it doesn't have to be one of us to start getting you to the roots of who you are at your truest core. And these are all positive things, right? Like, not the nasty stories we tell ourselves, but when you envision these beautiful things like our perfect day, it's all these little clues of, like, the smile you get on your face when you say certain things. That's a clue to something that lights you up, and it's true to who you are at your core. And so those things can be connected into your story that you get to create individually. And so that's one of the few things I do, usually over a few week period, or at least if we do it in one day, it's like 6 hours total. So I usually like to break it up because those are intense experiences, right? They're exciting and emotional, but they're intense still and take energy from us to really do and think about and spin us off onto other things.
Yeah, that's so true. So do you want to talk a little bit about what is a martyr and how is it different from, or is it the same as codependency? And you'd mentioned the fixing and helping versus serving. Do you want to dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, I feel like this might be an area for your moms too that they really could identify with, especially like you said, if they're rejecting the title, it might be truer to you than you want to believe. So the martyr is really like a super codependent type of person, and they're all about fixing and helping others, and they think they're serving, right? So it's really kind of sneaky and hard to unravel because it's flip sides of the same coin. If we're doing it in a healthy way, it's called serving or being altruistic. It doesn't have the emotional hooks in it that it does if we're on the fixing side or helping, because we're really trying to get some sort of value out of it. And the best way I can describe it is like, if you imagine that inside of you, you have a garden, right? And your garden's been trampled on, just emotionally, like people come into your life and they trample through your garden when you thought it was safe to invite them in. And that leaves kind of like a pain and trauma residue within you. And you start to enclose your garden, like build a shelter around it. And eventually you're blocking out like sunlight and all sorts of things. And you're like, I'm tired of my garden. I'm going to go and tend to somebody else's. It's not a conscious thing, of course. And so instead, we put all our focus into people around us and their garden and what it looks like and how it's doing, and pick that weed here and don't do that behavior. It will cause you pain and suffering like I had. And so we start to try to shelter other people from the imagined pain and suffering that we see is possible in life if we do certain behaviors or allow certain things. And so that martyr goes out and tends all of these other people's gardens and starts to feel drained and lost and caught up in these other people to where they don't even remember that they have their own garden or what their identity really looks like inside.
That's good. That's good stuff.
Isn't it just so simple to think of it that way versus codependency sounds scary and like some textbook diagnosis.
I know. And you'll hear different analogies for that. Stay on your side of the street, stay on your side of the net, tend to your own backyard. But I still think it's finding whatever connection point that you can really relate to. And I love that garden idea. That's just beautiful. It really makes sense. Be
a freaking farm. Really, it doesn't matter, right? Like whatever speaks to you is right. Like whatever coach and personality, whatever healer, it can be journaling that brings you along this journey, or listening to your podcast, Shar, is the first step that people need in understanding where they are in reality in this moment.
Thank you. So for my moms out there, I love the word enmeshment, and I want to talk about that. But for my moms out there, and I'll let you define it, but for my moms out there who are enmeshed in their relationship with their addicted loved one, I just want to ask you, how does this happen? And what kind of toll does this take on the relationship? And more importantly, this is what drove me to do this podcast. How does it get in the way of the addict's recovery?
Yeah.
And those are big questions.
It's so big. It's so big. Yeah. But they're really important too. And enmeshment can show up in so many ways, right? Like even me, for my mom, I was totally enmeshed with her. The behavior she did when she was drinking caused me shame. That's how enmeshed I was with her. Like if she was slurring too much or like stumbling or telling the same story like 10 times, I would physically feel uncomfortable and embarrassed, and I was so attached to how she behaved that I thought it was a reflection on me. And same with the good things, right? Like, so the good and bad all became a reflection on me because she's my mom and I'm her daughter, and that's how attached we are, except it's not. Her behaviors are her behaviors, and she is an adult making her own choices. And so that's an important part about differentiation that kids and their parents need to have, is parents can't decide that, the good things are mine to claim. So if my daughter gets an A on her report card, that's an awesome victory and she's a good person. That means I'm a good parent. Or if she's out using, that's a reflection on me and I'm a bad parent and I did something wrong. Like, at some point, we have to let individuals have their choices, and it doesn't make us love them or care for them or want to be there for them any less. It just changes how we show up for them, because it takes the shame and blame away when we're 100% responsible for our own behavior, just like all of the other people around us.
Mm-hmm. And don't you think that a lot of this is just education? Because I do see a lot of that. And of course, the society, I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but society does put the blame on the parent, and especially the mom. And the mom is blamed for being the codependent. The mom is blamed for having, an addict child. The mom takes responsible for all of those things. And then society does reward the mom when the child is successful and in college and, going on to do all these great things. And that may be a topic for another day, but it's just something to think about.
Yeah. And really, it boils down, I know you've heard me talk about it before, and I don't know if we have time, but those triangles, right? The victim dynamic.
I want to go there. So before we move on to that, so on the back to the enmeshment piece before we move on to the triangle, because I'm very excited about the triangle. I really want to talk about the triangle big time for my moms out there. So for me, I can totally relate. Personally, my story, I connect to your story. So how does this happen, especially for children of alcoholics?
Yeah.
Yeah. How does this happen?
And it's so slowly and over time, and I think it looks different for every person, that for me, the why is probably a therapy question, and I don't put personally as much credence into it unless it's really causing like some sort of psychological damage that you need to go see a counselor. So usually that's a conversation I have with my clients one-on-one, like, here are my boundaries, and that's not my expertise, and I'm going to own that fully up front. The question I usually come to is, what? What do you want to do with it now that you have the awareness that it's impacting you? What's the benefit you've been getting from it over time that keeps you going back to the enmeshment? And how, now that you know that that's happening and these beliefs are there, usually it's something like, I'm not good enough, that comes from way back when we were kids, right? And so if I want to feel good enough, I have to get my value from something outside of me. And so that can attach to all sorts of things. It might be our children and their behaviors. It might be different substances for people who actually get addicted, which is, I think most of us have some form of attachment to something, whether it's a psychological addiction or diagnosis is a whole different thing, right? So for me, I went through a time where I was like playing stupid games on my computer for way too many hours a day. But that was how I was coping with the enmeshment, because my mom was going through a really tough time and I was the one called on to take care of things when my dad was working up in Alaska commercial fishing. And so in order for me to stay in a manageable space, I won't even say like whole, because I wasn't at this point, that's what I did. I turned to video games. It sounds ridiculous now looking back. I was in my 20s. It wasn't even like I was a young child doing this. I was in my late 20s, about to be married. And that's what I was doing with most of my time. That's my pattern. That was my pattern, that I knew how to cope with things. And of course, there were other things too, like there's sex and drinking and gossiping, and all of these things can be ways that we manage ourselves.
Right. Sugar, caffeine.
Unhealthy ways.
I mean, the list goes on and on. And you know, it's this disgust for addiction may be another opportunity that we were talking about, where if you are disgusted by addiction and someone else's behavior, maybe we need to take our own inventory. When I was going through the training in the summer, the recovery coaching and the intervention coaching and whatnot, the first thing that they had us do was to stop sugar and caffeine and all that just for 24 hours. And it was laughable and it was lighthearted because it's coffee and you know, candy, but same thing. I mean, a lot of folks couldn't do it. They came back the next day and they had trouble sticking to it, and it was just laughed off. But the point being, we all have an understanding, some level of understanding. And I guess on the enmeshment piece, you know, when I ask like, how does this happen and the why and all that, because that's the part of me that wants to understand and help prevent further pain, right? But Dr. Reedy, Dr. Reedy I was talking to, he was so great about talking about this as parents. Just for those parents out there that are paranoid and they don't want to do this to their kids, just creating that sense of otherness in their kids. And that's kind of what this boils down to.
Yeah. And are you attached to the outcomes of their lives? Because if you're overly attached to it, to where it affects you and how you operate, that's not healthy. Like, we have to model that other people's actions are their actions. And if we can't do that, how do we expect our kids to? Like, they're going to start taking on all those same things and like continuing our pattern of enmeshment. And that can be a generational pattern passed along. Like, my codependency doesn't just appear for me out of the addictions I dealt with. My parents were also codependent, and their parents before them. And this has been passed down, and it's not easy to change or become aware of when it's that ingrained in family patterns.
Well, and I have a feeling the statistics are fairly high. You know, it's probably something absurd, like 95% of people have a problem with codependency on some level. I mean, it's
Not
bigger than
at
us.
all. It's way bigger than all of us. Oh, and that brings me back to one of the points you had of people blaming and shaming moms for addicted children. Yes, they're going to do that, but remember, when they have that emotional reaction, it's because they're trying to preserve themselves. It's a self-defense mechanism, right? Like, I'm a good parent because my kids aren't addicted.
Mm-hmm.
This could very easily happen to any one of them. And then let's see how fast the tables would turn. Not that I would wish that on anybody, right? Like, we have enough pain in the world. We don't need more of it. But really, it's a way of separating something that's really scary, which is addiction, from themselves by saying that cannot happen to me.
Absolutely. You're spot on. You know, I get a lot of questions from moms in various stages of their loved one's addiction, wanting to know, how do you start putting the pieces of your life back together after addiction or substance abuse or depression enters your life? And that is such a great question. And I guess I would just ask you, have you arrived at a place in your life where nothing seems to be working? Are things starting to crumble around you? Are your relationships suffering? Are you thriving in your career? How's your health? Are you taking care of yourself? Do you have the energy that you need to do the things that you want to do? Or are you spending most of your time alone and withdrawn? Maybe your friends are trying to get you out of the house and trying to remind you what it feels like to live again, but you would prefer to stay home and replay those memories over and over and over again in your head, the way things used to be before addiction entered your life. Some might call this rock bottom. For me, I think the most important first step is the decision that you want to live a different life. And I just think that it's ironic that that is the same starting point for our addicts. If you've gotten to a place where you're ready to reclaim your life and you want someone to walk along the side of you who understands what you're going through, someone who wants to help you manifest significant and lasting change to better your life, not only do I host this show, but I also do individual coaching and mentoring. And I would love to work with you and help you reclaim your life. If you're interested, you can visit my website at beyondhoperadio.com to set up your first free Life Beyond Hope session. If this interests you, as a nationally certified addictions recovery coach, I'm confident that together we can help you reclaim your life and allow joy to re-enter your heart and to learn to live again. And to have this not be contingent upon your loved one's addiction. And I know that seems impossible, but you can get there, and I would love to help you. It's interesting because I've only recently started to realize there's so many parallels between my daughter's journey and mine as her mom. And I'm really looking forward to diving into that deeper in future episodes. Thank you for listening. And please, you can always reach out to me via email at shar@beyondhoperadio.com. And I just send you so much love on this journey. I know it's difficult, but you have been chosen. Let's discover your purpose together. I'll talk to you soon. So let's take a pause here and let us talk about the dreaded drama triangle.
Don't you just love that title?
I love that title. I want you to create a really beautiful visual picture for our listeners. And talk us through it.
Yeah. And so all of this is available in David Emerald's book, The Empowerment Dynamic, or TED, Power of TED. And so the dreaded drama triangle is one of my favorite tools to use with people. It's so simple and powerful. And basically, you have a triangle with the point tipped down. So you have the two edges at the top at a parallel, and then the tip down at the bottom. And at the bottom, you have a victim. We know what the victim sounds like. I think we're really familiar with that as a society, of the poor me, it will never change, I'm stuck here, this is the way things will always be. And then up at the top left, you have the rescuer. That's my martyr people. Those are my people. That's our entry points that we naturally come to with the codependency in this dreaded drama triangle. And so what that looks like is jumping in to fix and save the victim. So we imagine these problems for them, because life is full of pain and suffering to us to save people from. And we basically manage and control, not to be mean or because we want the power necessarily, but because we really want people to have a good life, and we see the possibilities, and we just don't want the bad stuff to happen for them. Now, on the other side, on the right-hand corner, you have the persecutor. This is often the problem. It's the pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Just quit your complaining and move on. You know what to do. Why are you sitting and whining and complaining? So these are the sorts of messages they're saying to the victim. And now the reason why the rescuer and the persecutor at the top of the pyramid is very important. They're there because they both have a need that's fulfilled by having a victim below them. And so for the persecutor, it's really about power. So for them, they want the control and the power of feeling important. And there's some sort of belief that's usually behind that, like, I'm not enough, like we've talked about before. Similarly, with the rescuer, I'm not enough, so I need to have value. And so that's why they keep the victim there, and need a victim there is really to feel valued and important. And so the victim, and of course, is at the bottom and gets to stay there because they have these two forces helping keep them stuck there. So they can blame the persecutor for their problems instead of focusing on what really is in their control, or they can let the rescuer come in and do all the work for them, which actually prevents them from learning life's lessons around the problems and allowing them to go into a more positive space. So that's kind of how the pyramid works. And then in relation to that, what happens is there's this problem. We always focus on a problem when we're in this dreaded drama triangle. And when we have a problem, what do we feel, Shar? What naturally comes up for you? What happens internally with feelings?
Oh, dread? Or fear?
There's fear, there's dread, there's some form of anxiety, right? Like you just kind of get to be a mess, and there's just a lot of chaos that you're feeling. And you can feel that in your body and your feelings. Everything kind of becomes shaded by that anxiety. And so next step is exactly like what you said, is like, I need to do something, right? I need to solve this problem. But the things we do typically aren't to solve the problem. They're actually to get rid of the anxiety. And so that's when that numbing stuff comes in, or the addictions we talked about. So for me, what I would naturally do is start to fix and manage other people, because my problem was just too much to deal with. So I'm going to go and focus on other people. Not that I knew I was doing this again. It's just my natural pattern that I fell into. Or like the video games, when I went through that phase in my life, same thing. Felt anxiety, didn't know what the heck to do with it. Go numb. Go do something. Other people might fight. They might become really angry and lash out at people around them. And they all think that this is going to solve the problem. But what it does is it spins them right back into this cycle. It might temporarily relieve the anxiety, but the problem's still there, and it pops up again. And life says, hey, you haven't dealt with this yet. And we go back into that pattern. And so like a real world example of that pattern with the victim, the persecutor, and the rescuer could be with your moms, right? So I'm guessing most of them probably fall into that rescuer as well. They see their child as the victim of this addiction. The addiction's the persecutor in this example. That's just the problem causing issues in their child's life. And if it would just go away, everything would be better. Well, for the victim in this example, your child, it might be very different. The drug might actually be their rescuer that's taking them away from the pain and the problem. And you, the parent, might actually be the persecutor telling them this is bad and that they shouldn't be doing this anymore. And so it flips it all around. And because they're viewing their triangle very differently from you, they may lash out at you, which then causes you to be the victim and them to be the persecutor. And then you find your own rescuer, or it finds you. We can do all of this to ourselves too. Like, this might be us in our inner dialogue. We might be telling ourselves nasty things in the form of the persecutor, which keeps us as the victim. Or we might be telling ourselves things as the rescuer, saying like, don't worry, everything will be okay. We'll figure this out. Let me do this for you. I know how this works. And so it allows us to stay stuck in this dreaded drama triangle. But before we despair and get stuck in this world, which is where most of us live in this problem-focused society, there's a whole other triangle and dynamic you can go into, and that's the empowerment dynamic.
Yes.
I know you loved this one when we first chatted about it. It's so exciting. And so if you flip that pyramid on its head, right? So you now have the flat part on the bottom with the point up. Each of the places over on the original triangle, and I can share this with anybody, or like I said, you can pick up the book if you want to see it visually and really understand it, or even Google it these days, right? So at the top of the pyramid, there's the creator, and the creator is whole, resourceful, capable, and creative. We don't get to make someone else be the creator. This is all for us. So we are the creator just as everybody else is if they choose. We don't get to say, go be the creator already. What does that sound like? The persecutor, right? Or, don't worry, I know I'll save you. You can do this thing and be the creator. That's the rescuer trying to force somebody out of where they're at in their reality before they're ready. It's one thing if you're invited in to give this information to somebody. It's another if you're imposing it on someone who's not there.
Yes, yes.
So this is our inner work, not other people's, unless you're a coach helping somebody who came to you for a specific need, or a healer or a therapist, yada, 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 right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So good.
So top of the pyramid, top of the pyramid is the creator, and then you also have the challenger and the coach, and those are just the opposites of the rescuer and the persecutor. And they have different roles they play in this. And really that's about creating a different future. So the creator gets to start future envisioning. It leads to empowerment. And then you take your next step that moves you towards that imagined future that you really want. So it's kind of like goal planning instead of focusing on the problem.
It's so beautiful. And it just breaks it down so simply.
Yeah.
And that's when you
kind of brings the unconscious conscious, right? Like these are the things that were happening in the background automatically that we aren't even aware of half the time.
Well, and that's how you get stuck. And it's easier to put the blame on someone else,
Yep.
That's definitely the easier way to go. Doing our own work and looking within and taking a hard look at what got us here. I mean, that is the most important work.
Yeah, and I do want to say we can be victimized by something, right? Like that's a real thing. There are victims out there. We are victimized individuals, like it happens to us, and yet we can choose not to act as victim in this triangle. So that's a little different distinction that's really important. Like we can have something exerting pressure on us and trying to keep us down, and we can still choose other ways in the creator thing if we can see that pattern. And if others can't, it's not for us to judge. If we can't pull up ourselves out of it, like that's just where we are for that time and the lessons we're supposed to learn. I really believe that.
Yeah, and it's like part of this process too for me was, I don't know if it was almost this sense of embarrassment. Like, I should have had all of these tools by now because I'm old enough to know better. And that's just, once you're able to let that go, I think, again, that's just a barrier.
Yeah.
That's just getting in your own way. And once you're able to kind of let that go, there's so much.
That's a shame story.
There's so much beautiful joy in life on the other side of that. Like, once you're able to just let all that stuff go, I think that's when the work that's when the work begins.
Yep. That's beyond hope, right? You just tie it right in, don't you? I love it. It's
before we move on, though, I think it's really going to be a helpful for you to tie this in. You did a little bit, but tie this into how mom get in the way. And I'm just telling it like it is. We don't know. We're confused.
No.
We have no clue. Obviously, if we had the ability to take this away from our children, we would do that.
Yeah.
We wouldn't wish this upon anyone. So what I want to tie it into is just how this need to fix and this wanting to help and heal and all these things for our kids, by us preventing them from actually experiencing the negative feelings, how that hinders their recovery.
Yeah. Well, like we said, if you're in that dreaded drama triangle and you're trying to take away the pain and the suffering from your child, you're preventing the lessons that will potentially bring them over to the creator role when they're ready and when they choose. But by doing things for them and taking away those things and trying to manage and control all the circumstances instead of focusing on yourself, it allows them to actually stay there longer and not see their own way through it. And like you said, it's so unintentional and your heart's in the right place. But when you are externally focused, that's such a tenuous place to be because it's volatile, right? It's based on somebody else. But when you're in the creator role, you believe that you're whole, capable, resourceful, and creative. And you believe that about other people, even if their behaviors aren't necessarily showing that in that moment. You know, somewhere in them, they're able to get through this and figure it out on their own time. And you're going to be there to celebrate with them and be excited, or be the challenger role where you're asking, what do you need? How are you going to do it? But you're not doing it for them. And by being the creator yourself, you're modeling, I can manage my own pain and suffering. And this is how you do it in a healthy way. It's called self-care. Stacey did a wonderful podcast with you, and you talk about it all the time. And I also can have all the happy, exciting things because I really believe if you're trying to mute the pain and suffering from your own life, you're also not able to experience the positive feelings either, the joy and gratitude and celebration. You can fake it maybe to a certain level, but I think at some level you're going to know that it's not really ringing true because it's muted somehow by avoiding pain.
Absolutely. And once you learn this stuff, I mean, it just changes the way that you see everything. And it is possible to make these changes, and it's challenging in the beginning, but over time it gets a little less painful, and all of a sudden you start healing and things start to happen, and we're allowing more light and love into our life, and everything shifts. Yeah. Everything starts to shift. And
it's so true. And you know what? If you fall off and you forget that all of this learning that you did, you're going to get back to it faster because you've already found something that works. And so when you start to linger in that dreaded drama triangle, it's so ugly and uncomfortable. Well, not even ugly and uncomfortable. It's more like my relationship to that triangle has become less of a judgment thing and more of a guide. So my martyr that lives over in that triangle, when she pops up into my life, she says, hey girl, you're out of whack. You're not taking care of yourself. What do you need to pay attention to? And so she doesn't go away. It's just like I can hear her warning me that I'm getting off track, and I get to choose how far off track I go. by either ignoring those warnings or listening and choosing to go back into that place beyond hope.
Absolutely. And you can choose how long you're going to stay there. And you know that the control is within you. Like you get to decide. And you don't get to blame anybody for it. You don't get to blame anyone for it. You get to own that.
No.
And there's something very, very empowering. Yep.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
true.
It's like a buzz, right? Like it becomes so exciting to be over there and to kind of decide like what's good for you. And sometimes you can go too far into the light, in my opinion, too. I heard a TEDx speaker. He was one of the natives at the Dakota Access Pipeline. And he was talking about this play of like dark and light. And he said, you don't want to stay in the shadow because you can't see, obviously. But it's the same. If you spend too much time in the light, you go blind. And so, like, where's the harmony in your life where you can have healthy respect for both sides?
It's so true. And that we will dive into on another day because there's so much more to talk about that. There's so much more there.
Right.
And that's just going to be a beautiful, beautiful conversation on its own. But you are so right. I think we've talked about some really basic, but really profound starting points.
Yeah. It doesn't come in a day, right? Like you've been on the journey a long time too, and I'm still learning my way through it.
Yeah. And it's important just to, and you talk about this a lot too, it's just the asking for help. So when you find that you are kind of getting stuck in those old behaviors, having someone who understands where you are at in your journey that you can reach out to and be like, hey, this is what's going on with me, and just sometimes we can do it on our own, but sometimes we need some help, and just being able to own that and being like, hey, I need a hand up.
Yep.
I think that's huge. It's huge being able to ask. And then also just modeling that for our kids, because one thing about addiction is there's just this fear. I think it's mostly because our kids don't want to burden us with more pain, more struggle and whatnot. So they take it elsewhere and they don't know how to ask for help. And so it's just something that we can do. We can start recognizing, doing our own inventory, knowing when we're getting in kind of in over our head and we need a hand. There's no shame in that.
And the way you ask for help might be different from like your best friends. Like everybody is a little bit different. And I think that's why I fell in love with coaching and healing so much, is that it allows for that self-discovery of what your new pattern will be, of how you healthfully manage these different things. And it can be a very individual-based plan where you can listen to the input from others of what they do, but you get to cherry pick. Choose what works for you and leave the rest.
Absolutely. And that could mean, it's going to mean different things for everyone. And it may just mean that, tapping into some of your self-care, like the 8 dimensions that Stacey talks about. It's like, maybe you just need to get outside. Maybe, maybe you need to go, maybe you need to go spend time with family. Maybe you need to pick up the phone. Maybe you need to go to yoga. I don't know. It's going to be different things for
maybe
different
window
people.
shopping is your therapy. Who knows? Like, I'm not here to judge anybody's things. I have some weird habits that work really well for me.
All right. Give us one weird habit. Now I want to know.
Lately, I've been instructed by my healer, Jenny Dawn, to go outside and talk to the trees. And I was mortified by this. And as soon as she said it and I felt that huge visceral reaction and resistance, I was like, okay, I have to go do this.
That is awesome.
And it's amazing. Like being outside, just letting my thoughts out to nobody, to just the trees to be heard, instead of telling somebody else who might jump in with how to fix it for me or not give me the response that I need to process.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know how to ask for those things before. I'm getting better. But it's just been beautiful to be out there, like just letting it out of my body and voicing whatever it is in my head so that I don't sit and spin on it for hours or days at a time.
Does that count? Like I talk to the birds. Does that count?
Yes, exactly. That's the same thing.
Don't tell anyone that
We're not crazy people. It's actually really healthy.
It really is. It's good. These are all good things.
Right.
Well, and I talk about this a lot, but giving, how do I say this? Like when I gave my daughter her life back and let her celebrate her wins and also like take responsibility for her decisions, all those things, you are responsible for your choices. You get to own your wins as much as you get to own your difficulties. But obviously I'm going to be here to support you and guide you. And she is my heart and I love her so much. And there's nothing more beautiful than stepping back from her addiction and letting her know that I look forward to her inviting me in on her journey.
Yeah.
And that was really a powerful conversation to have with her.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I hear that completely. I had a similar conversation with my mom just a few months ago where I finally said, I'm really sorry for being angry and harsh towards you for so long and full of judgments. And I just want you to know whatever you need, you can tell me. And if you can't do that and that's not where you are, I'm okay with that too. But I'm ready to change our relationship by starting with me. Even though I didn't get a yes, let's go do it. Let's change our relationship. My mom's just not that much of a talker. Okay. And it was done. Right.
Yeah.
But that's who she is. And I'm finally actually seeing her and accepting it. And all I can hope for is that she feels the love that I'm sending to her.
Of course she does. She of course she does. Well, and the thing too is we're kind of complicated sometimes, and it's owning that. People can't read our minds, and but this has been so fun, and I've been looking forward to this conversation with you for so long, and I'm just truly grateful that you spent time with me tonight. And I absolutely know without a doubt that somebody is going to hear something that they need from you tonight, and I thank you for that. Thank you.
Same goes. I always hear something that I need from each and every one of your guests that I've listened to. And this is just powerful stuff. And I know you're touching the hearts of moms out there for the better.
Oh, and so are you. And thank you so much. And I want you to share, if you wouldn't mind, just share how can people get a hold of you? How do they find you?
You can find me at themartyrcoach.com, MARTYR. I'm sure all of it will be in the links on this podcast. And there's a great free quiz on my website to find out, are you a misunderstood martyr? And it walks you through some common traits of codependency. And then also with the future visioning of how connected are you to yourself and your values, and really gives you a good place to start looking at, should I improve? And feel free to join up on my email list. When called, reach out. There's no pressure here with me. I really aim to have natural conversations with each one of my clients, just like I would here on this podcast with you, Shar.
Thank you so much. Yes, and I will definitely drop all your information below. And I'm going to have you back. We're going to talk some more, and maybe we'll take some questions. If folks have questions for Stephanie, they can email those to me at shar@beyondhoperadio.com. And thank you for joining me. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in and for helping me to connect with other moms of addicts or loved ones who are struggling with addiction in their lives. If you have questions for me, comments, suggestions on future show content, or perhaps there's a specific topic that you would like to hear from an expert in the field, I would love to hear from you. I am also interested in sharing your voice. So if you have messages of hope or personal stories that you think would resonate with our listeners, please send me an email. You can type me out a message, or you can include an attachment to an audio clip with your voice. You can send that to shar@beyondhoperadio.com. And with that, thank you again, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Beyond Hope. For show notes and more, head on over to beyondhoperadio.com.
A huge thank you to recoveryinnovators.com and James Healy. Thank you so much for putting up with me and for helping me to produce and launch the show. I couldn't have done it without you. You are so awesome. And to anybody else who has been considering working with James, highly recommend him. Please go over to his website and check it out, recoveryinnovators.com.